Congratulations!
Why?
25 episodes.
Yes, we're a quarter of a podcast century old.
Many said it wouldn't be done.
Yeah, me being the
take that, Margot, and take that, Margot.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome everyone to episode 25 or episode 4 of season 3. It is a bit of a milestone because I genuinely didn't know that we'd get here, but thank you all for tuning in for this. For those of you just joining us, I'm Marco.
I'm Tarek.
And at the Page One podcast, we speak to authors, screenwriters, comic writers, video game writers, any type of writer, to try and find out about their writing process, talk to them about their work and get hints and tips. And who have we got on this week, Tarek?
This week we have Jonathan Whitelaw. He worked in politics up in Scotland and he then moved into journalism, and he's covered a variety of stuff, breaking news, the arts, culture, sport, fashion, radioactive waste, I believe, was a big one for him.
There you go. Very varied.
And people might recognise his face. He's a talking head on shows for the BBC and STV.
Yep. And he is also obviously an author, which
More
is why,
he's an author.
why we've got him on the show. So his debut novel was Morbid Relations, which was a darkly comic tale about a struggling Scottish comedian. And he followed that up with what was the first of a series of books that's become Hellcorp, in which the devil sets up a company to look after the sins of the world while he has a vacation.
As you say, it's a series now. There's a couple of books.
Yeah, there's a couple of books, and I think he's working on the next one, as he says in the podcast. And yeah, like I say, they're sort of darkly comic.
Yeah.
But there is definitely a mystery crime element to it as well.
There's a murder mystery element to it. There's a crime to be solved, running through the kind of like a Good Omens type story.
Yeah.
That
So
kind of narrative.
we speak to Jonathan about how he came up with that idea and why he came up with it, and about his writing process and what it's like to work as a journalist during the day and then come home and write fiction at night, and also the route that he got his books published is an interesting one because he didn't use an agent at all.
Yeah.
Just went straight to publishers.
So again, I think for those out there wanting to go it alone, you should get a lot of good tips and advice from Mr. Whitelaw. Yeah,
and the one thing I just wanted to say is that the Skype call that we had with Jonathan, the sound quality wasn't ideal, so there is a bit of poor sound in parts of the interview, but we've cleaned it up a lot.
Stay tuned at the end, don't forget, because we are going to announce the winner of the Dave Cook competition.
Yeah.
So you'll win a copy of Killtopia, signed by the author, as well as
the Page One notebook.
More importantly, of course, the Page One notebook.
Which is
the real reason why people enter these competitions.
Exactly, which is the notebook we designed for writers, divided into sections. We talk about it all the time.
But we also have another competition launching.
We do. At the end of the podcast, stay tuned not only just for the results of the Dave Cook one, but there is a new competition happening where you can win one of Jonathan's books. And we'll tell you more about that at the end of the podcast.
See you then.
We always start these podcasts with a very general question, which is, did you always want to be a writer? Was writing always your passion?
Yeah, I think it was. I think this is one of those questions that always sort of pops up when I'm doing sort of blog tours and stuff like that, and kind of live events and things. And it's actually one of those things that until I was published, I hadn't really thought about. So I kind of grew up always coming up with stories and things like that for my Star Wars figures. Massive Star Wars fan, Lego and things like that. I used to act them out, obviously. You have the X-Wing and Falcon. So invariably when my parents took me abroad, went on holiday and things like that, I wasn't able to take them with me. So I used to sit and come up with what I would do when I got home. So I would write it down, but I would write it in the form of, like a sort of narrative. And of course, it wasn't anything hugely original. Obviously it wasn't. I was only 18 at the time, but yeah, it was, and always obviously used to love getting the kind of creative challenges in school, primary school and stuff like that. It wasn't really until I was 16, 17 that I started properly, doing writing, as they say. And I remember, my parents moved house maybe about, I think actually it's coming up for almost a year ago. and they were clearing out all my crap from the garage and the attic. And I came across this sort of almost treasure trove of my work from school, and in it was a CD that had like 5 or 6 different versions of this kind of, this story that I'd been working on when I was 16, 17. And I looked at it and oh my God, it was dreadful.
We've all got those. We've all got those lurking about somewhere.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Talk about skeletons in the closet. This was bad fiction in the attic. But I mean, the thing was, it was 120,000 words. It was the worst mashup of Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and a little bit of Die Hard in there as well. And
sounds pretty good, I know.
I'd read that. See, that's the thing. I've sold it since I kind of got it back. I've sold it more now in the age of social media than I ever did when I was 17. But the thing about it was, it kind of taught me the discipline of sitting down and actually, working something out, working out plot points, characters. Don't get me wrong, it was absolute rubbish. But what I learned from it, discipline wise, to get that amount of work down on the one page, I'm still using the technique that I do. I had fantastic support from teachers and stuff like that. And really, I've been writing ever since. I've been kind of trying to write as much fiction as I can.
Mm-hmm. But you obviously took that love of writing into your job because you're a journalist by trade. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, and it's very, very different. A very very different approach. I'm kind of lucky enough. I'm a digital journalist. I've spent the last 10 years as a digital journalist. I've kind of written for print as well, on a kind of freelance basis, but it's 95% has been digital. And the nature of being a digital journalist nowadays is that 1 minute you can be writing about, I'll give you an example. At work today, I was working at one moment on a Rangers legal wrangle that's been going on with the kitmaker Hummel and Mike Ashley Sports Direct.
Yeah.
And next minute it was a little bit celebrity with Edinburgh's favourite Euro Millions winner Jane Clark. It genuinely does. It can change in the blink of an eye. It's
variety at least. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Again, in sort of hindsight, maybe if so I've always had the kind of treatment towards journalism is that I have a massive passion for it, and ultimately it puts food on the table, and I don't mind trying to turn my hand to anything really that's gonna pay the bills, and if that means that I'm writing celeb gossip stories, or it's hard hitting political stuff, or it's breaking news, or it's some terrible court case, then so be it. It's just the way you've got to be, unfortunately, in this market. It's good to embrace it.
And I suppose you'll gain a lot of skills from that, I'd imagine, because you're having to write to deadlines, and you're having to hit word counts every, by X o'clock. You need to have written so much, and so that must be quite useful when you come to writing books.
It is, yeah, it is. It's the very, very different worlds, the kind of literary world and journalism, but in particular digital journalism. The kind of I do a lot of training for people that come in that are maybe new to journalism. So and it can vary from kids that are sometimes still first year at university, first year at college, to older journalists who predominantly come from a print background. And the first thing we always say, or I always say as part of the training program, is that time will always be your enemy. There's no real deadline when it comes to digital journalism, because it all moves so fast, and you need to, because it's such a competitive environment, if you're not first with a story, if you're not first with a breaking story, if you're not first with something that you're working on, then you see a massive difference in the sort of traffic that you get to the website, traffic you get to the story, particularly if your competitors are faster on it. Mm-hmm. And for one better expression, pardon the language, if they're shit hot or shit hotter than you at it, then you do notice the difference,
Yeah.
Whereas in the literary world, it's a lot more. It's that relaxed. The pace isn't the right term. It's because it's all relative, I suppose. But you still invariably, or I still invariably find myself on deadline if I've got edits to do, if I've got first drafts to work on or anything. You still find yourself kind of running towards it, but it's you're talking scales of weeks and months as opposed to seconds and minutes really.
And how is it? How do you find it? Obviously, you're writing during the day for the journalism side of things, and then obviously you have to go home and sort of switch your literary brain on and then write your books or work on edits or whatever. Does that come easily to you? Because doing we all love writing, but if you do it all day every day and then suddenly you have to then say, right, I'm now going to write some fiction, do you not want a break from it sometimes?
Yeah, it's hard. It's one of these things that I try not to overthink it, although that said, I don't think I've ever been accused of overthinking anything right now. That's a completely different podcast. But I think I think you're right. I think it is a switch, and there have been times in the past where it has actually felt like the switch has gone off or the switch won't go off. Mm-hmm. The switch between the two of them, Mm-hmm. I used to sort of treat my journalism work almost as a warm up. I do a lot of kind of early starts and things like that, and depending on what you're doing, it could have been treated as almost like doing a 20-minute warm up before you hit the gym and kind of get proper do a bit of cardio and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But as the older I've got and the kind of different type of stories that I'm doing, it's felt more and more like you just don't get a warm up. It's just 2 gym sessions, and it can be very, very brutal. It can be. Again, I get a lot of joy out of it, and I think that's probably what makes it work for me is that I have a passion for both of them, mm-hmm. and they are maybe equal at times, And listen, it's not to say there aren't days where you wake up and think, God, the last thing I want to be doing is editing 70,000 words of a manuscript that needs to be done next week, or vice versa. Everybody wakes up and doesn't necessarily want to go to work that morning. Yeah, it happens, and it happens in both elements of it. And I always kind of say that I do feel like I'm a full-time journalist and a full-time writer because it's essentially all that I do. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's what I do, and I do it because I enjoy it.
So the first book that you've written, Morbid Relations, how did that come about?
Well, that was really an idea I had. It came out in 2015, and actually, talking about sort of writing techniques and things. Mm-hmm. I'm originally from Glasgow, but my now wife, she got a job through in Edinburgh, and she just said, guys, so we ended up moving through, but I was still working in Glasgow at the time, so I was commuting on the train. Just talking about back then, I mean, this is what, 6 years ago, something like that now, 5-6 years ago. So back then it was sort of 55 minutes on the train first thing in the morning and then the same again at night. So I used to just sit and plug in and write for those 2 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. Mm-hmm. And I got the idea, and I've written the first draft of it in 6 weeks.
Wow, that's very fast.
What became the final, after edits and things like that, what came out was only maybe about another maybe 2-3 weeks on top of that.
Wow.
So it was a really, really fast turnaround. And the idea itself, I've always loved comedy. I've always loved stand-up comedy, and it's the old adage: if you can't do, teach. Well, for us writers, if you can't do it, then write about it. So I always loved. I've always had a kind of fascination with characters and work that I've TV, movie, books, obviously. I always love a character who still can't do it for whatever reason, still can't get that break, or still isn't good enough to do something. I kind of love that, and obviously, kind of 5-6 years ago, and to a certain degree now as well, there was this real sort of spike in stand-up comedy, where people were going from literally nowhere, backwater clubs playing the 50, 60 people to suddenly national tours, international tours, starring in movies. People like Kevin Bridges, John Bishop, You know, these bit funny people who really rode that wave of popularity of stand-up comedy. And I had this idea of having a comedian, Rob Argyle, who's the kind of lead character. I wanted him to, even in this golden age of stand-up comedy, he still can't get a break, you know, for one reason or the other. More often than not, it is his fault. And that was really the sort of starting block of it. I tend to start with characters before necessarily I kind of have the plot to build around them. And then obviously the nature of the first book, it's about him sort of returning from Glasgow after his fairly unsuccessful career as a stand-up comedian. His mother's died, and reconnecting with his estranged sisters, and just that sort of, it's a sort of coming of age novel for a near middle-aged man, and I've always liked that. I've always liked that kind of notion of a character who almost doesn't grow up, you know, and it's all his fault, you know, and
that sort of flawed character is always more interesting than you know, someone who's got everything laid out for them, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then following that, you got Hellcorp, which well, I'll let you summarise it. Do you want to tell the listeners what Hellcorp is?
Certainly, it's so it's about the devil, who is sort of sick of being the cosmic bad guy. He's been the cosmic bad guy for eternity, and he decides that he wants a holiday. And he sets up this company, Hellcorp, which is set up on top of Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh, because he wants to get the sand between his cloven hooves. But God, being the distrustful character that he and she is, thinks that he might be pulling a fast one, so he challenges him to solve the murder of a man who took 40 years to die. So he's taken out of his comfort zone, plonked into a human body in contemporary Scotland, contemporary Glasgow, and he has to solve this murder if he's going to get his vacations. They say.
I mean, it's such a unique idea and take and setting, and it's got you know, as you say, there's this sort of murder investigation happening, but it's also a very, you know, darkly funny book as well through it. I mean, where did you get the idea for that? Where did that come from?
I mean, the thing is, I'm a massive fan of crime fiction. You know, always read copious amounts of crime fiction, and obviously even Scotland, there is such a rich vein and rich history of it. You know, Tartan Noir is its own genre. And quite frankly, I never ever thought that I'd be clever enough to come up with something that's a proper kind of murder mystery. You know, I'm one of these people that if I was to commit a murder, I'd get caught straight away, or would do it outside a police station or something really stupid. You know? Which I suppose is quite a nice thing, is in a sort of roundabout way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't want to be a qualified, you know, serial killer, but I don't. There was an element of fatigue for me as well. You know, you guys will know it as well as readers and writers and stuff. And we're all the same. You know, we live in a golden age of television. We live in a golden age of cinema, of literature as well, particularly when it comes to the crime fiction.
Yeah.
And you know, we're spoiled for choice. But my issue was rather that we've had every sort of detective under the sun. You know, you've had. They're not alcoholics, they're workaholics. They're not workaholics, they're work shy. They're not work shy, they're drink shy. They don't have some crippling addiction or problem, or they're estranged from their family, or they're not estranged from their family.
Yeah.
Or,
So
you know,
true.
it's
So true.
every box is ticked. So I always said that if I was ever gonna, you know, really kind of get my thinking cap on and have a right proper go at this, I didn't want that. I wanted a character, and I wanted an anti-hero, going back to what we were talking about before, that sort of flawed character. And then I just had this idea about, you know, well, who could you classify as the ultimate anti-hero? You know, who would be the ultimate anti-heroic figure, literally anti-heroic figure? And regardless of your belief system and faith or lack of faith, really, what have you, there's always this sort of universal figure of pure evil who kind of manifests itself in doctrines as the devil or Satan or Lucifer and these types of characters. And I thought, you know what, I would love to put that person in a situation where they have to be the good guy for a change.
Mm-hmm.
And what would that do? What would that, how would they deal with that? And another big part of it, another big motivation for it was I love authority figures sort of being cut down to size, really pompous authority figures cut down to size. And actually, I was reading an article earlier today actually about Terry Pratchett and the kind of the depths of his talent have helped so many people get through so many different emotions and different sort of states and good and bad things in their lives. And he was always a master of that. He could take he could take things and bring them down to the kind of street business, all with one sort of cutting comment. And with that sort of ringing in my ears, I thought I'd love to do that with this sort of omnipotent persona of evil and get him to not want to be the bad guy anymore and get him to solve a crime.
I mean, actually, bringing up Terry Pratchett, there is definitely a link to Good Omens in the sense of it's good and evil.
Yeah,
and it's not your classic. It's not like a super bad. It's like it's evil, but there's something likable about the evil.
Yeah, they're having to work together to do something. Yeah,
definitely.
And so you when the time came to getting these books out there, what kind of path did you go down to try and share your books?
Well, with Morbid Relations, it was a case of I actually self-published it. I think I self-published it in October 2014, and I'd sort of sent the manuscript out to a couple of publishers, sort of local publishers in Glasgow, and they got in touch with me, I think maybe 2-3 weeks after I'd hit go on it actually, and they offered me a contract. So I think the contract the contract for Morbid Relations was sort of signed and sealed a couple of weeks after I'd hit go on the self-publishing route. I think back then self-publishing was really it was actually really key for me because it was getting my work out to a mass audience, and I know that there does sort of maintain this sort of snootiness and snobbery around self-publishing that it still does exist, unfortunately, in fairly large quarters. And I always remember, just as a sort of side tangent, when I was first starting to do my journalism, I used to do a lot of music reviews, and for my shame, and I won't name who it was.
You can tell us after.
I'll tell you when the red light's off. It was I once wrote, it was a guy who'd self-produced his own album and what have you. In fairness to me, it wasn't very good. But I remember writing in the review, we live in a digital age where you don't have to book studio time, you don't have to send, the traditional sort of demo tapes and stuff like that. People can be recording music. Similar situation with writing. You can be writing books and publishing them all within your kitchen or in your bedroom or what. But just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. And I know that with the kind of the self-publishing market, it's a fantastic outlet to get your work out to a mass audience and to maybe get you noticed. However, you have to take it seriously, and I think you have to be serious about editing. You have to be serious about reading, marketing, and it is a tough gig. It is a hard gig to do.
Well, we've spoken to a couple of people that have self-published and actually made a success of it, and what came across there is that you must, as you say, you must treat it like it's a professional contract essentially.
Absolutely.
And it's a job. You need to edit it properly, get it properly formatted, and also once it's there, you have to put a lot of time and work and effort into marketing it properly and getting the word out there. Otherwise, it's just going to die. No one's going to pick it up.
I suppose it is a kind of double-edged sword, isn't it? The ability to put your book out there is a great thing, but the fact there's so many folk doing that means you want it to stand out, and that is a full-time job, making it stand out and polishing it to a level that folk notice it.
Absolutely, and the people that do make a massive success of it, exactly as you guys say, it's the ones who are taking it completely seriously, and they're treating it seriously, and they're treating it professionally, more importantly, and it's and I do love it. I love it as a format. I really, really do, and I think it's there, and it can give writers, if nothing else, self-belief to get out there and put your work out on show, because, as I always say, if I'm taking kind of creative writing classes and speaking to people, and I'm always asked, what's your best advice? I always say just write. There's no point having the greatest novel that's been in the history of mankind sitting in your head or on your hard drive, and that's where things like self-publishing come in. Yeah. But it is a lot of work, and I think a lot of people might not necessarily appreciate that until they get into it. And it is all well and good for someone like myself who's done it and is now done the traditional publishing route to say that. And a lot of it is experience. You don't learn these types of things. You don't learn the little foibles of it until you are there on the front line and having to deal with the fact that when you send the work out to bloggers, to blogs, to national review desks on national newspapers and magazines, and that sort of snobbery still exists. You don't know that until you face it head on, and all the advice in the world can obviously go a long way of helping, but it's a great education. And again, another thing that I always maintain for people that are wanting to be a part of this industry. And it is an industry and it is a business, is that, you've got to educate yourself in the ins and outs of it, as you would any other job.
Absolutely.
Because it is a job. It is a full-time job.
And so had you kind of skipped over the whole trying to find the agent part, and you go straight to the publishers? Is that what you did?
For Morbid Relations, I did. Yeah, I'd had quite a few sort of manuscripts and ideas and things that I'd kind of knocked around for maybe 4 or 5 years beforehand, and had gone trying to get an agent, trying to get publishers, predominantly agents. And then I don't think it wasn't really that sort of light bulb moment. It was just a case of thinking, well, the nature of being an agent is that it's one more person that you've got to convince to get this book out there.
Yeah.
And I completely appreciate the hard work that agents do, and all agents do that. And I understand that they've got boots in doors and legs up rather in the industry more than your average bear. But I think I was frustrated. I think I was frustrated in the nature of it, that I thought, well, now that I've finished this book, now that I've finished this idea, it's all ready to go. Don't get me wrong. I think my journalism background certainly helped, because I think I was able to look at it with a lot more of a critical eye, than maybe me with my personality would have been able to do if I wasn't, regularly editing work for work, words and understanding of it and things like that. And so I pitched it straight to the publisher, and like I said, they were absolutely delighted to get it, and I was delighted to get my.
What you've said there about having a more critical eye answers one of the questions that I always ask, because it's something I struggle with. It's just, you can always go back, or certainly I find that you can always go back to something the next day or the next month and say, oh, I could improve that bit, or maybe that would work better. And you keep trying to polish, and you never really know. Yeah. Or you kind of lose confidence that this is properly finished, even if at one point it was.
Yeah, you're so close to it though, you could have in it too much. Yeah.
So, having that ability through your journalism to sort of step back and have that critical eye is obviously quite an important thing. Do you show the manuscript to anyone else, or?
Yeah, well, my wife's both my fiercest critic and my biggest fan, and she always she's always happy to read and be brutally honest. And she hands out praises when it's due. Apparently, not that I hear. That comes with the territory, unfortunately. And that really helps. So with The Man in the Dark, which is out just now, that was a big change for me, because that was the first time that I'd written a sequel, and it was the first time that I'd written anything in a sort of series. And what's in the final book just now, I'd say maybe only about 10 or 15% remains from the first maybe one or two drafts, and it was one of those scenarios where the more I went on with the sort of first and second draft, the more I felt this isn't working. This is getting out of hand. It went, as I've described it since, it went full Fast and Furious, and I use that example. You look back at the first two sort of Fast and Furious movies, they're kind of street racing films.
Yeah.
Now they're superhero films almost.
Exactly, precisely. They're jumping cars between skyscrapers and nuclear submarines and all this kind of carry on. Listen, look, it works for them. That's good on them. These are top grossing movies. But for the Hellcorp series and for the second book in the series, it wasn't working. Just as a little sort of insight, there was Apache gun ships and all this kind of carry on in the second one, and I was writing it and I was like, oh, this is great. And then as soon as I finished it, I thought, do you know what, this isn't going to fly, for want of a better expression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I ended up dumping maybe about 75,000 words off the book. It was mostly the start and maybe the tail end that appear in the current one that were in the original draft. But listen, don't get me wrong. It needed to be done. It had to be done, and The Man in the Dark, which is on the shelves, is a lot better. Is 100 times better, and it was always going to be a lot better than that original draft. But sometimes it has to be done. Sometimes you have to just take that step back and go, do you know what? This is it.
Did you, because is it Urbane Publishing that publishes those? Do you show it to do you have an editor there that will also look over the manuscript as well?
Yeah.
But did you do the cutting before you gave it to the editor?
Yeah, I did. Urbane have been absolutely fantastic support with my writing, the Hellcorp series in particular, but my writing in general. We had one of the authors sadly passed away suddenly last October, I think it was, and I ended up writing a charity short story for the publisher just at Christmas there that raised some cash for the Samaritans, which was fantastic, and that's the sort of level of support that I get from.
Wow, yeah.
Which I'm really, really so grateful. And I'm sure they'll appreciate me brown nosing.
But we've kind of skipped over the part where. So how did you get Hellcorp with Urbane? How did that happen?
It was actually a fairly similar story. Actually, the kind of nature of what Hellcorp is and what Morbid Relations is. They're very, very different books. Morbid Relations is it's still a black comedy, but it's about family life, and it's a sort of coming, like what we touched on earlier. It's a coming of age story, whereas Hellcorp is a urban fantasy thriller crime novel set in contemporary Scotland. Very, very different, ticking a lot of different boxes, but none of the ones from earlier. So. Ringwood, my original publisher, they weren't interested in it. It wasn't something that they were it wasn't anything that they'd published before, so it wasn't something that was going to fly. So it was a case of just pitching it to Urbane, who were right away again so supportive and so keen to kind of get it on board and really sort of. Really fitted in with their direction and still fits in their direction. I'm glad to see. And again, cannot stress enough how supportive they can be, because that's the thing about it. As we've chatted about just now, it ticks a lot of boxes, and that sometimes can work in your favour as a writer, but also it can work against you as well, because suddenly it's asking, who's this audience for? Is it too many different audiences who might not be, none of them are interested as opposed to people being interested, I always say, or I always said when Hellcorp came out, that it was my sort of my revenge on bookshops. I give staff a headache every time my books come in, is that they don't know if it should go on regular fiction, go on crime, fantasy, go on sci-fi, and I'm glad to say that I've seen it on every single one of those shelves. Sometimes at the same time, which is really cool.
So when you had to deal with Urbane for Hellcorp, was it a 2-book deal, or did they come back to you and say we want another one, or did you pitch us one as a separate book?
I pitched Hellcorp as a standalone, actually, and it was a case of them really sort of taking. They took that on just as on a 1-book deal, and then over the course of writing it and kind of preparing for it coming out, I came up with the idea for the second one. So I pitched it to them. I think I sent the full manuscript to them the week before Hellcorp came out. They went away and considered it, and then it was just before Christmas 2018. I signed the deal for it to come out in September, just there in 2019. And I did a similar. I've gone through a bit of a similar situation with the third one, which is with them at the moment. No spoilers, obviously. But yeah, that was the thing. I didn't, I didn't go into writing Hellcorp as a with it being a series. I left it open-ended enough that should I want to do it, then it's there. But it wasn't ever planned out to be this, 5, 6, 7, 10, 20 book series. Yeah. But that said, I always kind of pride myself on challenging myself as a writer, and as I mentioned to you guys before, I've never ever written a sequel to any of my books or series, and doing that with The Man in the Dark was a real pretty cool challenge.
And I think it would be interesting to our listeners just how you chose to approach a publisher. We spoke about this a bit earlier, but how you chose to approach a publisher directly rather than via an agent. Do these small press publishers have guidelines? Do they say they're open to submissions, or did you just sort of pick a few and just take a chance?
I was, I think with Urbane, I remember it was around about Christmas time when I first approached them. That would have been 2017, I think. And it was actually just by chance that I came across them on Twitter. Checked out their website, saw what they were into, thought, do you know what, Hellcorp sounds like something that might be right up their alley. And it was simply a case of kind of dropping a speculative email to them, saying, look, I've got this work. It's a full manuscript. Here's my history. Here's my kind of my CV. Would it be something that you'd be interested in? And it really went from there. But most publishers, most independent publishers, I think what you'll find is that they'll go through periods where, like, unsolicited submissions, which is when an author can send work to them. They'll go through periods where that's open, and then they'll go through periods where it's closed, because that's the thing, publishers, just like agents, they are inundated with hundreds and hundreds of emails a week, and pitches a week and stuff like that, and it really does, you really have to be there at the right place at the right time sometimes, and it can be a very, very frustrating business. Again, I always say to anyone who's kind of starting out on that adventure, read up on the publisher, see what they've published in the past, look what they're looking for, see what sort of direction they want to go in. And this applies for agents as well. Agents are busy, publishers are busy. They're busy people because it's a busy industry. And the last thing that anybody wants to do is send someone an email with, whether it's not formatted correctly, if it's not for them, if it's in a genre that they don't represent or what have you. Yeah. You don't stand any chance. It's just going to get ignored, and you're doing yourself a disservice as a writer, by not kind of paying attention to the nitty-gritty details. And it's something that, as a writer, you've got to do. You've got to have that sort of eye for detail. You've got to have that dedication and that professionalism to want to succeed in this industry.
And actually, one thing you can do as well is, I think, was it David Baldacci, I think, said this, that you can, the way he found his agent or publisher, I can't remember which one it was that he found a book that was similar to his and looked at the acknowledgements section. And that's quite a good idea for, if you're not sure who to send this to, find similar works to yours and look at the acknowledgements, and you'll get the names of people that is worth approaching.
And what happened when you got the contract through? Did you ask anyone for help with that, or did you look at it? Were you worried that you might be getting taken advantage of, or what kind of steps did you do at that point?
I mean, I've been very, very lucky in the contracts that I've been offered for my work. I've always been over the moon with them, and I know that that's not always the case with everybody. And there's people that I know who are writers and who had some really, really bad experiences. But again, that happens in every walk of life.
Absolutely,
it's not something that the literary world is any exception for. My brother is a lawyer, so it's always, I always think it's handy to have a lawyer in the family. It's quite nice. And his fiance is a lawyer, so I always do give my contracts to them just as a sort of once over. But I mean, that said, being professional about it, looking over the contract. If you have any queries, always just ask. It's not. It's ultimately down to your ability and your professionalism towards it. Like I say, I've been very, very lucky in that everything that I've been sent, I've always been delighted with, and it's always sort of worked out very, very nicely for me.
Nice.
And in terms of your writing process, are you, as they say, a planner or a pantser? Do you plan everything out, or?
I should. I think that's the key to it, is knowing what you should do, not necessarily what you do. I always kind of have a bit of a cop-out response to something like this, in that I do a bit of both. I know it's dreadful. I know it's stuff, but I know that I should plan out more. I know that, well, the example I was talking about there with the Man in the Dark, I knew that if I'd set out with a lot clearer a goal or clearer a point that I wanted to reach earlier in that process, it wouldn't have gotten as far and gotten as out of control as it did with the Apache helicopters and things like that. But I say that, I know that the book that it became wouldn't have become the book that it is without going through that process. So it's that sort of double-edged sword where you think, well, you can overplan, and if you overplan, you might miss out on something. I have that dreadful. This is going to sound awful coming from a 33-year-old man, but that awful new phrase, FOMO. I have that dreadfully when it comes to kind of writing and stuff like that, and I love to leave it open. I love to leave it enough of the book and enough of the plot, and definitely with the characters. I love to leave it open enough that that through the process of writing, I can try something new with it, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You know, because I kind of worry that if I plan too much, if I compartmentalize it too much, then it kind of loses a little bit of its charm, which is...
Yeah, absolutely. You can definitely overplan these things.
I think if you do plan too much, as you said, you take some of the surprise out of it a little bit for yourself, and you do kind of blinker yourself a little bit, don't you? You don't see the possibilities that where it could go, because you've already, I've written it down, this has happened, so I'm going to write this bit next. You don't think about the other options.
That said, of course, you could use a special notebook to plan out.
If only someone had made some sort of notebook.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, how you guys are professional. You guys are fucking professional.
I meant to say planning's the best. Sorry, I love planning.
And do you ever suffer from writer's block, or that sort of phrase? Do you ever get stuck in your writing?
I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where there are times when you just can't sit, and I think that's what I get with I think that's my writer's block. I don't ever think it's necessarily that I can't work my way or write my way in and out of something. I think it always just comes down to that, whether it's general fatigue, or that. You guys are writers yourselves. Mm-hmm. I'm very, very aware of if I've sat and written 5,000 words because I said I was going to sit down and write 5,000 words today, and I know that it's garbage. I will stop at 500 words, and be okay with that. I will be fine with it, But then it works the other way around when you think, right, well, you know what, I'll sit and do a couple of hours of this today, and then you end up writing 10,000 words, and it's not all that has to be good, not all that has to be great, but you feel a lot better and you get more out of it. And keeping that sort of approach, again, kind of going back to that process, the writing process that I had with Morbid Relations, that was very, very rigid, very, very disciplined, very, very strict. And it was born out of the fact that I had the facility to do it. I had to go, travel 5 minutes a day to work and then 55 minutes back. Yep. And I think it worked. I think it worked for that novel. I think it worked for that book. But I know for a fact that as a writer now, 5, 6 years after I wrote that, it just wouldn't work for me because I certainly wouldn't be able to write the Hellcorp series and the situations and the dialogue and the type of character you get in those books. Mm-hmm. That wouldn't work in such a regimented fashion. Yeah. So I don't do it. It's as simple as that. It's a lot more flexible than that side, which is good.
And have you ever wanted to write something other than a novel? Have you ever been tempted to write a script or a comic?
Certainly, yeah. Oh, absolutely, yeah. I'm a big fan, big graphic novel comics fan. Always have been. Grew up reading them and very, very different. A very, very different approach to the novel. Well, one thing that I kind of deeply, I don't regret it, but I deeply resent. I suppose I don't resent it either, but it's the kind of the nature of novel writing is that you're talking about 80,000 words usually minimum, and can go all the way up to silly numbers, and so there isn't that sort of instant gratitude for it. And actually, funnily enough, the going back to the Christmas Hellcorp novel for charity, I found that really, really liberating because it was only 2,500 words. Yeah. And to have the characters that I'm normally slogging away, working with a that much longer development, and much longer window to play around with, having that just sort of reduced to that 2,500 words was actually really, really cool, and it was really, really great to see it because it was all done. It's all done and dusted within maybe about 2-3 days, as in going from me having the idea, writing it to the publisher, and being available for charity. It was all done in a couple of days, which was really good. And it was nice to do. It was really, really nice to do and sort of see the fruits of the labour all within a short turnaround. But I still think that the novel writing, the medium of writing novels is my place to be. I did study sort of screenplay writing and script writing at university, or as a sort of postgraduate module at university, and loved it, and a very, very different world. And again, I never say never. Yeah. And I'm always happy and always excited to have a new challenge with my writing, because I think it stays off in places, which is always good.
What was the last book that you read?
The last book I read actually was Victoria the Queen, by Baird, the kind of non-fiction. And I'm sort of I'm about 3/4 of the way through it. It's more of a kind of reference. It's for a project I'm working on the side at the moment, just away from the Hellcorp series. And actually, I dropped Julia an email last week, I think it was. I've always sort of, just as a very, very kind of quick aside, this kind of project I'm working on can loosely be termed as historical fiction. And one of the things that sort of put me off doing it in the past, a bit like what I was doing in crime, is just the sort of levels of research that you've got to go to get that real sort of genuine, authentic feel.
Yeah.
And I was recommended this book by Julia Baird, and it genuinely is fantastic. It's written really, really well, and it's not written like a textbook at all. It's not written like a sort of, a non-fiction reference book at all. And I dropped her an email, just out of the blue, last week, to tell her that. And I said, it's really, really opened up this door, to me, making leaps and bounds on this project that I'm working on. And she got back to me, actually. She got back to me the other day there, and she was very, very grateful.
Brilliant.
It's just a really, really cool thing to do. And again, this is one of these things about being a writer and being a full-time writer, is that, you get to meet all these fantastic people that do such great work, and they more often than not, they have time to get back to you, and in some cases they get to know you and they become good friends, and it's really, really awesome. It's really, really cool.
So is that the book that you're working on next? Is that one you can't go into?
It's sort of developed, it's sort of grown arms and legs over the course of the last 2-3 weeks, and it kind of feels that it's sucking me in more and more and more and more, and it tends to be the one that I go to first when I turn on the computer if I come home at night. So I guess we could say that that's the one that I'm working on.
Excellent.
And what was the last film you watched?
Last film I watched was The Death of Stalin. I watched that
brilliant.
last night, I think it was, night before, and I hadn't seen it. Again, massive Armando Iannucci fan, and never quite gotten into Veep, actually. I watched a couple of the first episodes, and it just never ever kind of struck me, and this came out. It's been out for a couple of years now, 2018, and never ever got a chance to go see it in the cinema. I've been meaning to download it since then. I actually came across it quite by accident on Netflix the other night there, and watched it and thought it was great.
Yeah.
Thought it lacked a Peter Capaldi. I think it's
you always need someone like that.
I've still to watch that. I'm a big fan of him as well, but I've not watched that film yet. But I've heard it's good.
And what was the last TV show you watched or are watching?
So we are watching a show called Cheer at the moment on Netflix.
Oh, I've heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's about it's a kind of docudrama series which Netflix are very, very quickly, if they've not already established themselves, they are quickly developing a reputation for these really, really in-depth docudrama series. 6-8 episodes that they build behind the scenes. In this case, it's about Navarro College in Texas, who are like the college for competitive cheerleading.
All right.
And it really does shine a light on what these kids are going through in terms of kind of athletics and stuff. And actually, it's actually really, really dangerous. All the kind of flips and jumps and stuff. It kind of it doesn't pull any punches in the series. It shows that this kid's kind of going off and getting checked for concussions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Stuff. Really, really well shot. Really, really kind of fascinating look into something that's actually growing more and more over here in the UK. I was speaking to my editor today, and his daughter, she does it, and it's the older she's getting, the more competitive it's getting. And, they go to tournaments up and down the UK and across to Europe, and a really, really fascinating, really, really well put together show that it's well worth checking out.
Sounds a bit like, is it kind of Last Chance You type?
Yes, very, very similar. Yeah, exactly the same idea, exactly the same concept. I don't know if it's the same people behind it, but it's
same feel to it.
Exact same feel to it. Cool. Yeah, looking at kind of behind the curtain, as it were, to the what appears to be a very, very glamorous, very, very kind of glitzy thing to do, but actually the kind of human cost behind it. Yeah, really fascinating stuff.
Nice.
And then the very last feature is an either or. So if you just choose one of the two options we give you on each of these, Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
No hesitation.
Well, I said it there. It's Star Wars just because we were talking about earlier on. I've always loved it, but I'm very excited about the new Picard series.
Yeah, absolutely.
That looks terrific. But yeah, it'll always be Star
What did you think of Rise of the Skywalker? Without spoilers, in case people haven't seen it.
It's the 9th movie in a
factual statement.
40-year-old franchise. Then that's it. But listen, it's divided a lot of opinion. These types of things are always people are gonna have opinions about it before they go and see it.
Oh, absolutely,
totally.
And I thought the team that was behind it and what they did, I think, was the best that you could do, given that you've got 40 plus years of lore. 9 movies, plus spin-offs, plus TV shows, plus X, Y, and Z when it comes to these things. And if I'm sitting in 20 years' time with a 9th Hellcorp movie out,
it's the best one yet. Yeah,
actually, exactly. And do you know how hard this is? But no, listen, I enjoyed it. Of course, I enjoyed
it. God or the devil?
Oh,
I have to ask that question, of course.
Dear, oh dear. Gosh, that's hard. It probably shouldn't be hard, should it?
Interesting how long it's taken you to.
Exactly. There's very much a right answer and a wrong answer. I'm going to go with the right answer. I'm going to say God. I'm a good person.
A real book or an e-book?
I'll go for a real book. I'll go for a real book because I still enjoy the thrill of going into a bookshop or ordering something online and it coming and you having that book in a bag.
Yeah.
I was speaking actually, funnily enough, I was speaking to some colleagues in work just before Christmas, and we were talking about how you walk around high streets, Princes Street, Buchanan Street in Glasgow, and at Christmas now you don't see the sort of the same level of plastic bags that you used to see.
Yeah.
The kind of designs and stuff. Now I always remember growing up and being really excited around about Christmas time because you would see what are House of Fraser doing for their design this year, what are Marks and Spencer's doing for this. And don't get me wrong, first of all, that's how sad a child I was. It's all for a very, very good cause and for a very, very good reason why we don't do this. But I still get the thrill of buying a book in a shop and putting it in a plastic bag and going home, and actually still seeing people coming out of Waterstones or Blackwells and stuff and wondering what they've got in that bag. You shake, you think, oh, is that a graphic novel? Is that a War and Peace, or is it something else? I still get filled from that.
I'm a Kindle man because I just love the convenience of it, but there's always something about the physical product, I think, which is always going to be a one-up, I think,
The smell. I've got a weird thing, the smell of books. A new book.
Yeah, but you're a weirdo.
I'm a weirdo. In a lot of ways, I'm a weirdo. But we won't get into that because we've only run out of time.
We'll do one more. Fancy restaurant or a takeaway?
I'm going to go fancy restaurant. And the reason I'm going to go fancy restaurant is that I don't get to eat enough of them. So if anybody's listening who wants to start go to fancy restaurants, then I will more than happily take it.
So that was Jonathan Whitelaw. As you heard, if you want to go out to a fancy restaurant, he'll happily join you.
That's a competition prize this week, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. No, I thought that was a great chat with Jonathan.
Yeah. Really good.
I'm interested when we speak to people that don't use agents and go straight to publishers. It's obviously a route that can work, but it's not one that you're ever encouraged to do.
No, I was going to say that it goes against a lot of the advice you read online about, go through an agent because, and I'm sure there are stories of people who've been scammed by publishers, and there's a lot of vanity publishers out there who will, you'll pay them to publish the book, and that's never the way the money should flow. But we've chatted to a few folk now who've done it themselves and made a success of it.
Yeah, no, so it's definitely something worth, with that sort of indie small press publisher, definitely worth something looking at. They've all got submission guidelines, as Jonathan was saying. But as I said at the start of the podcast, we have a couple of competitions to deal with.
You know why you're all really here.
Yes. So we'll announce the winner of the Dave Cook competition, first of all.
Okay.
So Tarek, if you could just rummage into the tombola and pick out the winner.
Dig in here. And the winner of the signed Dave Cook comic is Samuel George London. His Twitter handle is @SamuelG London.
Yeah, so thanks for entering, Samuel. and I'll be in touch. I'll drop you a DM, and we'll get the signed copy of Cultopia and the Page One notebook sent out to you. So thanks to everyone who entered that competition. And as I said, we've got another competition this week, which is to give away a signed copy of The Man in the Dark, which is Jonathan's second book that he was talking about there in the Hellcorp series.
But not just a book, Marco.
No, not just a book. He's also kindly donated a Man in the Dark t-shirt as well. And of course, you get the Page One notebook as well. So that's a great competition. We're going to run that competition for a couple of weeks. We'll put all the details on our social media, Twitter and Facebook, and that will give you all the information you need to enter the competition.
But who do we have on next week?
Yeah, next week's episode is an interview with Christian Devine, who you may not have heard of, but I suspect many people will have heard of what he's worked on. Mm-hmm. He is a massive name in the video game industry. He wrote games such as Deus Ex, and more recently the award-winning games Life is Strange and Life is Strange 2.
It was a really good chat we had with him.
Oh, it was
really interesting.
Really interesting chat. Even if you're not into computer games again, which is always what I always say when we have someone. But it was really fascinating chat that we had with Christian. And if you've not checked out the Life is Strange games, even if you're not into computer games, because they're more almost like a sort of Netflix series, I would say.
Once again, it's not a shooter or a Grand Theft Auto. It is a very Netflix type show. Small town America, two girls at high school. Not what you would typically associate with the video game, but it's a fantastically well written piece of work, and
it is.
The branching pathways and all that stuff that we all love, and he has a really, really good chat with them about how you plan all that, how you write all those different sections. So if you're a fan of those games, you'll love it.
Yeah, and even if you're not, you will hopefully love them after you've listened to Christian speaking about them. And before we go this week, the only other thing I wanted to say was that if you want to get in touch, you can get in touch with us at podcast@rightgear.co.uk. And also, we would love it if you're enjoying the podcast, if you would leave a review for us on Apple Podcasts and rate us, because that really helps the discoverability of the podcast, helps push us up the charts, which helps us get more guests for you to listen to. So it's a win-win for everyone. And we'll just leave you with a few words about Page One.
See you next week.
See you. The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realise it's not just the story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with Page One.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please leave a comment down below, hit that thumbs up button, and be sure to hit that subscribe button as well so you never miss an episode like these ones below.
And if you want to get in touch, you can always drop us a tweet in the Twitter machine, which is at UKPage1, as evidenced here, and our other social media channels are available.
Otherwise, we hope to see you next episode.
See you later.